I became the ultimate villain in the apocalypse. Ding! Congratulations, host. The super system has been activated. Since the host is transmigrated into the body of a villain in a post-apocalyptic novel world, the ultimate villain system has been successfully bound. Currently, you are in the initial stage of the plot. The protagonist of the apocalypse, Lin Fan, the god of war, has returned from rebirth. Please kill Lin Fan as soon as possible. The faster you kill him, the more rewards you will receive. Congratulations, host. You have received the initial villain gift pack. Villain's Eye, upgradable, allows you to view all characters' information, including identity, faction, favorability, key abilities, etc. Villain Space, upgradable, a static storage space with dimensions of 20 meters in length, width, and height. This space is an essential skill for the apocalypse villain. How can the host become a qualified ultimate villain if they can't surpass the protagonist? Suit Thug Template. When you wear a suit, you become the embodiment of elegance and violent aesthetics, with body enhancement and maxed out combat skills. Did I transmigrate? Gu Ziming was a bit dazed. Just a moment ago, he was watching the Olympics, excitedly jumping up as the national team won another gold medal. And then nothing. He had transmigrated just like that. He had transmigrated into a comprehensive post-apocalyptic novel world. Although he was a second-generation rich kid, based on the plot, he was just a minor character who gets humiliated by the protagonist. When Gu Ziming came to his senses, he found himself sitting in the back seat of a Rolls-Royce with a glass of red wine beside him. He couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. Transmigration was a settled fact, and since it couldn't be changed, he might as well enjoy it. Moreover, experiencing life in a different world is something that many people desire but cannot achieve. Gu Ziming closed his eyes, resting his head slightly on the soft leather headrest, and began sorting through the memories in his mind. That's right, as all those who have lived through it know, before the protagonist of the apocalypse rises, there is always a self-torturing plot where he is heartlessly abandoned by his girlfriend, who then turns to a second-generation rich kid. And he, Gu Ziming, is that second-generation rich kid. If the plot unfolds smoothly, the protagonist, Lin Fan, returns from rebirth. Knowing in advance that the apocalypse is coming, he hoards supplies on a large scale. Then, when the apocalypse arrives, he watches Gu Ziming and his ex-girlfriend struggle bitterly in the post-apocalyptic world. Once the protagonist gets tired of watching their misery, he crushes Gu Ziming like an ant with a light stomp. After that, he continues to torment the ex-girlfriend, making her regret abandoning the protagonist. Thus, a minor character meets a perfect end. Knock, knock, knock. At this moment, the sound of someone tapping on the car window interrupted Gu Ziming's recollection of the plot. Gu Ziming rolled down the window, and a pure face with large, grape-like eyes came into view, carefully examining him. This is the opening scene of the plot, where Gu Ziming goes to the school to pick up the protagonist's girlfriend, Qin Feifei. Next, they will encounter the reborn protagonist, Lin Fan. The two will mock Lin Fan, and Lin Fan will shout, "You two adulterers will regret this," before leaving in anger. "Who are you?" Gu Ziming asked, pretending not to know. The girl outside the window gently replied, "I am Qin Feifei, a student of Professor Liu." "Are you Mr. Gu?" "My professor was suddenly transferred by the higher-ups, and before leaving, he asked me to coordinate the patent matters with you." "Patent? Not here to do something bad?" At this moment, the original memories in Gu Ziming's mind began to surge, making his head feel like it was about to explode. It turns out that the biochemistry company under the Gu family wanted to buy Professor Qin Feifei's latest special graphene patent. To show respect, Gu Ziming planned to personally pick up the professor for a meal. The original appointment time was set, and it was only 4:30 now, so Gu Ziming was resting in the car. It seems that Qin Feifei approaching Gu Ziming in the plot was purely accidental. Gu Ziming couldn't help but rub his temples and sighed. "I almost got misled by the author. I can't just rely on the plot. This is a real world." "What, sir, are you okay?" "No. Ziming. Get in the car, let's go have a meal and talk while we eat." Gu Ziming didn't say much more, as there was no need to say more at this moment. Qin Feifei looked a bit nervous, but still softly replied, "Okay, Mr. Gu." After saying that, Qin Feifei just opened the car door and was about to get in. She even stuck out her tongue a bit, slightly complaining that Mr. Gu had no manners. A loud shout interrupted her action. "Qin Feifei!" Gu Ziming's face lit up with joy. The drama was finally about to begin. At this moment, Lin Fan's fury was about to erupt from his head. His fists were tightly clenched, and the pain of his nails digging into his palms was completely overshadowed by his anger. Yes, at this moment Lin Fan had returned. In his previous life, during the apocalypse, Lin Fan had struggled to survive for 6 months, only to be stabbed in the back and killed by his teammate over a piece of spoiled jerky. And that piece of jerky was given to him by Qin Feifei. He vividly remembered his dying moments. Qin Feifei nestled in Gu Ziming's arms, pretending to cry, though not a single tear fell. Gu Ziming was even more despicable. He said with mock concern, "Rest in peace. I'll take care of your girlfriend," then turned and left with Qin Feifei. But now, I, Lin Fan, the favored son of fate, have returned, and I swear to make this adulterous couple feel the full cruelty of this apocalyptic world. I'll make them understand what it truly means to desperately wish for death, but be unable to achieve it. Hearing the commotion, Gu Ziming also stepped out of the car. At a glance, he spotted the protagonist standing out from the crowd like a crane among chickens. Lin Fan had delicate features, a slim build, and a slightly pale complexion, but his eyes sparkled with brightness. However, the heavy dark circles under his eyes obscured the light emanating from them. Despite these physical traits, Gu Ziming still couldn't be completely sure that Lin Fan was the protagonist. But the moment he saw Lin Fan's face, he couldn't help but feel the urge to mock him. This was undoubtedly the protagonist's exclusive anti-counterfeiting mark. Using his villain's eye, Gu Ziming took a closer look, and sure enough, it was the protagonist. Name Lin Fan. Identity and faction. Righteous protagonist. Favorability. -99. Main abilities. Infinite space. Knowledge of the world's operation after rebirth. Damn, starting with a favorability of -99. Could this be a feud of life and death hatred? A grudge for stealing a wife? A vow to be irreconcilable with me for eternity? At this moment, Qin Feifei snapped out of her daze and shouted toward Lin Fan. "Lin Fan, why are you here? If I hadn't come, would you have gotten in his car? My arrival must have interrupted your plans, right?" Lin Fan, as expected of an apocalyptic protagonist, had already suppressed the fury in his heart by now. The way he looked at the two of them was as if he were staring at two corpses. Gu Ziming observed the protagonist's transformation and immediately understood. There was no way to resolve this grudge now. It didn't matter what the situation was. As long as the protagonist believed it, that belief became the truth. Just as villains are innately driven to mock the protagonist is inherently repelled by villains. Is there any chance for reconciliation with the protagonist? Impossible. Even if the villain explained the truth, got on their knees, and begged for mercy, it wouldn't work. A wavering will, a bleeding heart in the apocalypse. These are deadly flaws for a protagonist. Of course, even if Lin Fan were to kneel before Gu Ziming and beg for mercy, it wouldn't change anything. Their identities and factions were already predetermined. Moreover, the system rewards were tied to killing this so-called favored son of destiny. This was fated to be a duel where one of them would die. Besides, since I'm already a villain, isn't killing a protagonist exactly what I'm supposed to do? Yes, exactly. To sum it up, when it comes to a fight between a villain and a protagonist, the advantage is mine. Let's go. It seems your friend isn't very welcoming toward you. After meeting the protagonist, Gu Ziming lost all interest in staying any longer. The current Lin Fan was just a mad dog freshly reborn from the apocalypse, filled with resentment, anger, and fear, all desperately seeking an outlet. And Qin Feifei, along with him as the minor villain, were the perfect targets for the protagonist's release of emotions. In the original plot, the protagonist slapped Qin Feifei, announced their breakup, and left feeling relieved. As for Gu Ziming, he acted like a clown, losing his temper, losing his mind, and engaging in a series of actions targeting Lin Fan. The result? He ended up delivering free kills, handing over equipment, and ultimately losing his life. Qin Feifei frowned and gave Lin Fan a glance before getting into the car. President Gu, Lin Fan is my neighbor. We grew up together. Maybe he's been through something upsetting today, which is why he acted like that, Qin Feifei explained reluctantly, her expression not looking too good. Are you two dating? Gu Ziming asked the question that had been lingering in his mind. After all, in Lin Fan's first life, Qin Feifei and Lin Fan were in a relationship and even survived together in the apocalypse for 6 months. But judging from how obediently Qin Feifei got into the car just now, the two didn't seem to be in a romantic relationship now. Moreover, in the first timeline, when exactly did Qin Feifei betray Lin Fan, and what role did Gu Ziming play in it? Although these events were glossed over in the original story, they were still crucial to Gu Ziming. After all, his character's description existed only in this initial segment of the protagonist's memories and the final moment when he was written out of the story. We're just neighbors. After saying this, Qin Feifei turned her head to look at the scenery outside the window, clearly not wanting to continue the conversation. Neighbors? It seems their romantic relationship would only develop during the apocalypse. Now, the plot had deliberately given Lin Fan, who had returned from rebirth, 1 month to prepare resources for survival. Starting today, in 30 days, the apocalypse would descend. It was said that a cosmic storm had caused the sun's reactive layer to become abnormally active, releasing a massive amount of heat radiation that raised the Earth's average temperature by 10 degrees. The polar ice caps in both the Arctic and Antarctic would melt entirely, triggering extreme disasters that would claim countless lives. Gu Ziming recalled the descriptions of the apocalypse in the book and realized that, apart from the protagonist, everyone else had a miserable time. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully depriving the protagonist of 130 points of fortune. The Fortune Exchange store is now open. Items in the store can be purchased using fortune points taken from the protagonist. I haven't done anything yet. How did I already deprive the protagonist of fortune? The host caused the female lead, Qin Feifei, to feel dissatisfaction toward Lin Fan, plus 30 fortune points. The host caused Lin Fan to experience unresolved psychological distress, plus 100 fortune points. It was understandable that the protagonist was feeling unsettled, but Qin Feifei is the female lead? Noticing the system's notification, Gu Ziming was surprised to discover that Qin Feifei was the female lead. Thinking about it, it made sense. The story began with Qin Feifei, then transitioned to Lin Fan building his massive harem, and finally ended with Qin Feifei becoming a slave. Throughout the plot, she had the most significant presence. There was also the most critical piece of evidence. It was said that after following the minor villain Gu Ziming for some time, Qin Feifei still ended up returning to Lin Fan's side like snow embracing the plum blossoms. Alright, the author's intentions were blatantly obvious. Gu Ziming opened the system store. It was filled with a wide variety of items, including skills, knowledge, and other intangible goods. At the same time, the store's prices were well suited for an apocalypse. For instance, 1 point could be exchanged for 1 kilogram of rice or 500 milliliters of purified water, basic survival supplies. However, the same 1 point could also be exchanged for intangible items such as basic mathematics or beginner dance skills, things that required significant time and effort to learn during peaceful times but had little impact on survival in the apocalypse. The more practical an item was for the apocalypse, the more expensive it became. The car soon arrived at the planned destination, a state banquet restaurant. Gu Ziming, still maintaining his gentlemanly demeanor, opened the car door for Qin Feifei to step out. The two of them, a handsome man and a beautiful woman, walked side by side into the restaurant, catching the attention of passers-by who couldn't help but take a second glance. Entering the private dining room, Gu Ziming saw a table full of exquisite delicacies. Gu Ziming couldn't help but sigh. In the apocalypse, even someone as wealthy as him might find it impossible to enjoy such a meal again. The high temperatures wouldn't only alter the ecological environment, but also severely impact countless species of plants and animals. Miss Qin, may I address you this way? Despite the delicious food in front of him, Gu Ziming wasn't distracted. He intended to settle the patent issue first. Lu Xiaoxiang, whom Qin Feifei referred to as Professor Lu, had invented a special type of graphene with exceptional thermal conductivity, at least 6 to 7 times faster than ordinary graphene. If Gu Ziming could cover the shelter he planned to build with this special graphene and extend it deep underground before the apocalypse arrived, it would become an excellent thermal barrier. Moreover, Gu Ziming had an even grander vision in mind. "Yes, you may, Mr. Gu," Qin Feifei replied nervously, as it was her first time participating in such a formal business negotiation. "Good. Professor Lu must have mentioned to you that I want to purchase the patent for this special graphene outright. We've also discussed the price before," Gu Ziming said with an inquiring expression. "Yes, Mr. Gu," Qin Feifei nodded. The professor mentioned that she hopes to add an additional 5% to the patent fee. She glanced at Gu Ziming, and seeing no change in his expression, she continued. "The professor is also willing to personally guide the production process at your company. Additionally, if there are any future research breakthroughs based on this technology, she will offer them to you free of charge." Gu Ziming took a deep breath, closed his eyes to think for a moment, and slowly said, 3%. "If that's unacceptable, then forget it." In the original story, the reason Lin Fan became the warlord of the neighborhood, rather than recklessly slaughtering his way through the apocalypse like other protagonists, was that the national government still operated steadily, albeit with reduced control. In scattered survival points, people practiced self-governance or small-scale skirmishes. The government didn't have the resources to micromanage them. But if any group grew too large, it would inevitably attract government oversight and regulation. This was why Gu Ziming insisted on obtaining the graphene patent legally and properly. Once the apocalypse broke out, this excellent thermal material would skyrocket in value. Of course, it might be requisitioned, but there would certainly be compensation. Otherwise, if trust was lost, the apocalypse would truly descend into chaos. Gu Ziming's ambitions were never limited to dominating a single neighborhood. Sure, being a lazy shut-in enjoying food, drinks, and leisure in a shelter might sound comfortable. But what would happen if a more formidable protagonist emerged later? Besides, who in their right mind could claim they'd survive the chaotic apocalypse unscathed? Apart from the protagonist, there are only 2 things in this world you cannot look at directly. One is the sun, and the other is the human heart. And in 1 month, both would reach their peak. "All right, Mr. Gu, my mentor's bottom line was 3%, and you've managed to hit it exactly." Qin Feifei didn't drag the negotiation on any further, as it was clear that Gu Ziming was firm in his stance. Lu Xiaoxiang had already told her beforehand that 5% would be ideal, but the absolute minimum was 3%. Now that the negotiation was settled, the tense atmosphere in the private room relaxed significantly. "Miss Qin, Professor Lu mentioned you to me, saying that you have a real talent for chemistry, particularly organic chemistry," Gu Ziming remarked casually as he started eating. Qin Feifei was momentarily stunned. "My mentor mentioned me to you?" She then gave a shy smile. "It's all thanks to my mentor's guidance." Lu Xiaoxiang hadn't actually praised Qin Feifei to Gu Ziming, but since it was written in the plot, it didn't stop him from complimenting her anyway. In Lin Fan's first timeline, Qin Feifei had used some materials to connect her home with Lin Fan's and added heat insulation treatments. From the protagonist's perspective at the time, however, it was simply seen as her forcibly taking over his property. "I studied under Professor Lu for a while as well, so I suppose that makes me your senior," Gu Ziming continued. "Really? Mr. Gu, you studied at EC University too?" Qin Feifei looked at Gu Ziming with wide, curious eyes that sparkled with a pure and innocent academic air. TSTS. Who would have thought this same girl would undergo such a drastic transformation after the apocalypse? "I just worked in Professor Lu's lab for a while. I didn't attend EC University," Gu Ziming said with a smile. "But if you don't mind, you can call me Senior Gu." Gu Ziming was currently in Longgua's East Sea City, the capital of Qin province. EC City was known for its unique scenery, with a 100-meter cliff along its eastern edge, overlooking the sea below. EC University, meanwhile, was the most prestigious university in Qin province. Of course, I don't mind. Senior Gu is still someone who learned under my mentor. After all, Qin Feifei replied with a shake of her head, accepting his goodwill. The atmosphere grew even lighter after that. The two chatted while eating, with Qin Feifei sharing amusing anecdotes from school and occasionally poking fun at her various professors. Gu Ziming mostly listened quietly, chiming in with a comment or two now and then. Gradually, their relationship grew warmer. After finishing the meal, Gu Ziming even had some untouched dishes packed up for Qin Feifei to take back to her dorm as a late-night snack for her roommates. Finally, he dropped her off at the gates of her university. Looking at Qin Feifei as she walked into the school gates, Gu Ziming activated his villain's insight system. Name: Qin Feifei. Faction: neutral, preset female-led. Favorability: 30 acquaintance. Key skill: advanced chemistry. Favorability thresholds: 0 indicates a stranger. Starting at 30, 1 is considered an acquaintance. A score of 60 or above indicates friendship. 90 signifies a lover or close family member, and 100 represents unwavering loyalty. Negative numbers, of course, indicate the opposite. Gu Ziming reflected on the day's events. At the start, he had skillfully avoided a direct confrontation with the protagonist. Later, he successfully acquired the special graphene patent, and finally, he established contact with the preset female lead Qin Feifei. Every step had been meticulously calculated. If he had recklessly clashed with the protagonist at the beginning, given his current strength, there was no way he could have completely crushed Lin Fan. Acting rashly would have only alerted Lin Fan and caused him to act more cautiously in the future. The patent was crucial for his future development and also served as a safeguard for his own survival. As for Qin Feifei, on the one hand, forming ties with her limited the protagonist's fortune. On the other hand, Gu Ziming had to admit he was a bit enamored by her charm. Cough, cough. I'd never compromise my principles, but beauty is beauty. Meanwhile, Qin Feifei returned to her dorm room, carrying several large bags. She lived in a 4-person dorm, and, coincidentally, all 3 of her roommates were present that evening. The moment her roommates spotted the bags in her hands, along with the aroma of delicious food wafting from them, they immediately began teasing her. "Oh my Feifei, finished your date and still thought of us, huh? Feifei, good job. You didn't forget about your sisters after meeting a guy. Ah, I'm starving. Is this an angel descending to save me from hunger?" Although relationships in female dormitories could sometimes be complicated, Qin Feifei felt her bond with her roommates was relatively good, and they often joked with each other. Hearing their teasing, Qin Feifei's cheeks flushed slightly. She hurriedly tried to explain. "It's not what you think. I'm just helping the teacher with the discussion. These things are leftovers from the dinner party. I packed them up to bring back. If you want to eat, come and take some. Don't be picky." "Ah, we misunderstood. Let me see what leftovers you brought back." Several girls gathered around. Hiss! There was a sound of someone gasping in surprise, and the others weren't worried about gaining weight. They immediately started showing off the food. Watching her roommate happily eat the late-night snacks she brought back, Qin Feifei shook her head and smiled. She just thinks Senior Brother Gu is a nice person and could be a friend, but they are still far from talking about love or dating. Ding! The host has changed the female lead's view of the antagonist. Luck plus 120. Gu Ziming was a bit confused when he suddenly heard the system's prompt. They were so far apart from Qin Feifei, and he hadn't done anything, yet he gained luck. Now Gu Ziming somewhat understood the rules of this luck point. There are 2 ways to gain luck. Either reduce the protagonist's luck or increase your own luck. Suppressing the protagonist naturally weakens their luck. If you pull characters from the protagonist's camp into your own, it can also be seen as increasing your own luck. Gu Ziming thought to himself. In apocalyptic stories, the protagonist is usually a strong male lead, but there are often many female supporting characters, and Lin Fan is no exception. In the early stages, it was fine. They hoarded resources, but later on, they started collecting crazily. Besides this neighbor goddess, there are also the flight attendant upstairs and the chance encounters with school beauties. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being rude. Gu Ziming, who crossed over, always remembered a saying: unite all the forces that can be united, gather as many friends as possible, and have as few enemies as possible. The next day, Gu Ziming woke up very early, because today there was something crucial to the original plot. A 200 million lottery ticket was about to be drawn. The deadline for purchasing was at noon today. It can be said that the reason the protagonist could live so comfortably was because they bought this lottery ticket after returning. Because the protagonist's infinite space can only store items that are touched. However, the items must be complete and cannot be obtained from a distance, so one must first possess the items before they can be stored. This 200 million is a reasonable cheat for the protagonist. Gu Ziming set off early in the morning and spent 3 hours driving to a lottery shop in the neighboring town. He then spent 10 points to exchange for a mask that disguised his face, put it on, and walked in. "Boss, give me 20,000 tickets for these 5 consecutive numbers." Gu Ziming took a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to the lottery shop owner, speaking in a hoarse voice. After buying the tickets, he changed his appearance again and repeated the operation in several other lottery shops 5 times, until he had bought a total of 100,000 tickets for the number the protagonist had chosen. In the protagonist's previous life, no one had bought this number. So when Lin Fan returned, in order not to attract attention, he casually bought a ticket. Here, the lottery rules state that the prize money is divided according to the number of winning tickets. If Gu Ziming does not buy, then Lin Fan would monopolize all the prize money. But if Lin Fan buys 1 ticket and Gu Ziming buys 100,000 tickets, then after winning, the prize money Gu Ziming receives would be 100,000 times that of Lin Fan. Soon, it was past 12 o'clock, and everything had become a certainty. At 9 p.m., at Lin Fan's home, there were still 15 minutes until the winning numbers for this lottery were announced. Having just taken a shower, Lin Fan sat upright on the sofa, his eyes fixed on the computer screen without moving. As time slowly passed, Lin Fan's heartbeat quickened, and his palms began to sweat slightly. At 9:15 p.m., it was time. Lin Fan watched as the numbers changed one by one. Everything felt so familiar until the last number was fully revealed. He won. Lin Fan's veins bulged on his forehead, and he couldn't help but let out a loud shout. In Gu Ziming's villa, as he watched the lottery numbers, Gu Ziming felt a slight ripple in his heart. Although 200 million wasn't much for him, Lin Fan not winning that amount was a significant blow. Gu Ziming didn't know how much capital Lin Fan had, but it wouldn't exceed 10,000. Since Lin Fan's parents passed away, he had been relying on loans to attend university. Now that he had just entered the workforce, he hardly had any cash. The only valuable asset he might have was the house his parents left him, which was not worth much. If an apocalypse were to come, Lin Fan might even resort to online loans due to his lack of funds. By cutting off these 2 aspects, Lin Fan's resources would be minimal, let alone the need to modify any safe houses. The financial offensive was just an appetizer. Once Lin Fan had no resources and no shelter, even if Gu Ziming did nothing, it would be hard for him to survive. Ding! The host has intercepted the protagonist Lin Fan's 200 million development funds. Luck plus 18,888. Gu Ziming looked at the coins that popped up and couldn't help but feel that this was a significant blow to Lin Fan's lifeline. He looked forward to seeing Lin Fan's expression when he went to claim his prize the next day. The next day, Lin Fan was so excited that he couldn't sleep all night, but when he got up in the morning, he was still full of energy. Wearing a t-shirt with a sun explosion graphic and a Pinocchio mask, Lin Fan rushed into the provincial lottery office to claim his prize. What? A loud roar shattered the tranquility of the lottery office. Are you saying I only won 1 ticket worth 2,000 yuan? Lin Fan gritted his teeth, glaring at the staff like a lion ready to pounce. Yes, sir. The grand prize is 100,000 yuan for 1 ticket, and you won approximately 2,000 yuan. Would you like me to help you redeem it? The staff understood Lin Fan's regret for winning a grand prize, but buying too few tickets, so they tried to comfort him jokingly. "Sir, you don't have to pay taxes. If you had won the grand prize, the tax would be 40 million. Lin Fan didn't hear that joke. When he heard that the grand prize was 100,000 for one ticket, his mind buzzed. How could this be? How could this be? It shouldn't be. Am I living in a dream? Lin Fan muttered to himself as he went to claim his prize, remaining in a daze. It wasn't until he stepped out of the lottery office and the dazzling sunlight pierced his eyes that he snapped back to reality. No, it was definitely not a dream. The torment of the past 6 months, every minute and every second, was so real. The scorching sun burning on his skin, the pain from being stabbed by a piece of rotten meat, the anger from being betrayed by his beloved. All these memories told Lin Fan that the apocalypse was real. It was just that something unexpected happened with the lottery. Who knows, maybe there was a rat in the warehouse. After all, such a large prize would naturally stir emotions. Lin Fan clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and his gaze became resolute again. On the other side, Ziming didn't think too much. After a bit of disguise, he went to claim the grand prize in batches. The nearby lottery shops were exceptionally busy due to this grand prize. Whenever someone came in, the owner would start boasting about how things were back then. After Ziming finished claiming his prize, he returned to his villa estate and carefully calculated his assets. There were still 28 days until the apocalypse. He needed to start building a shelter and stockpiling supplies. He had already chosen the location for the shelter, right in his villa estate. The Gu family estate was located on the eastern mountain of the Second Ring Road, an area filled with luxury villas. However, the Gu family occupies the largest area. Everything above the mountainside belongs to the Gu family. The estate covers about 6 acres, and the villa occupies over 800 square meters. Ziming thinks that the first step is to renovate the villa to make it safe and livable. To truly block out high-intensity ultraviolet rays, high temperatures, and other dangers, a basement shelter needs to be established. However, it can be built in conjunction with the villa's basement, allowing for mutual support and further expansion outward and downward. This will likely take about a month. At the same time, Ziming must also stockpile enough supplies. Although he can't store everything in the space like the protagonist, he can build a warehouse on the estate for that purpose. Moreover, he also carries a villain space with dimensions of 10 meters in length, width, and height, which is sufficient. By the way, it can also be upgraded. System. What are the requirements for upgrading the villain space? 1,000 luck points can be exchanged for 1,000 cubic meters of space. 1,000 luck points is the minimum unit. Looking at his approximately 20,000 luck points, Ziming pondered. Items like clothes, beds, appliances, most industrial goods that do not deteriorate, and potable water can be directly stored in his estate. More precious items like meat, grains, drinking water, and medicines can be placed in the villain space. As for vegetables, just storing enough for backup will suffice. Ziming plans to establish a soilless cultivation room specifically for growing vegetables for his own consumption. This way, he can be self-sufficient in vegetables, and the space can be used more efficiently for storing grains and meat. System. Exchange for 12,000 cubic meters of space. Ziming thought about the original 8,000 cubic meters. Now with 20,000 cubic meters of space, the food and water storage will definitely be sufficient. The remaining luck points will be kept as a reserve. Beep. Exchange successful. Congratulations. The villain space has been upgraded to 20,000 cubic meters. The space has been exchanged, and now it's time to start buying like crazy. At Lin Fan's home, Lin Fan lay weakly on the sofa. Right now, Lin Fan is feeling a bit troubled. A rich man is fine, but a poor man has it hard. As Ziming guessed, Lin Fan only has a little over 6,000 yuan in cash. This is after just receiving last month's salary. Lin Fan and Qin Feifei are from the same year, but different schools. Lin Fan got into a nearby vocational school next to Donghai University. This is normal. The protagonist's achievements are significant, and before the reincarnation, he generally didn't have much. Unfortunately, Lin Fan reincarnated late and didn't do so before the college entrance examination. Otherwise, he could have been a top student at Donghai. After graduating from vocational school, Lin Fan entered the workforce while Qin Feifei continued her studies for a master's degree. In fact, Lin Fan has a secret in his heart. He has always believed that he is supporting Qin Feifei's studies because he often treats her to meals. Isn't it considered supporting her if he pays for her meals and drinks? This is also why Lin Fan was so angry after what he perceived as Qin Feifei's betrayal. However, in reality, Lin Fan frequently invited Qin Feifei to dinner, but she often refused, despite being both a neighbor and childhood friend. Qin Feifei only occasionally accepted a few times and then didn't feel it necessary to treat Lin Fan to a meal. So, she often asked her mother to buy some groceries or daily necessities for Lin Fan, hoping to repay him in this way. Of course, in Lin Fan's eyes after reincarnation, this was just the mother-in-law's family trying to use small favors to gain access to the house left to him by his mother. As Lin Fan got up from the sofa to prepare instant noodles, he thought fiercely, "I've reincarnated. How can I still go hungry? And that rich guy and that shameless woman, I swear I will repay all the harm I suffered before 100-fold." Donghai Gu Ziming's laboratory, boss's office. Gu Ziming is facing a dilemma, a happy dilemma. Yes, that's right, he has too much money. Recalling his background, Gu Ziming couldn't help but feel emotional. Some people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Gu Ziming's father has a PhD in biology from Massachusetts. After graduating, he met his mother, who was already an executive at a Fortune 500 company. His father started a business, and his mother immediately resigned to help him manage it. With a good partnership, work was not tiring. In the end, the two of them built a peak unicorn biotechnology company with a market value exceeding $60 billion. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last long. Due to certain reasons, the U.S. unilaterally announced that they were on a sanctions list for allegedly endangering national security. And Gu Ziming's parents tragically died in a plane crash over the Pacific Ocean. The unicorn company that had flourished because of his parents also declined due to their unexpected demise. Perhaps scared by the situation, Gu Ziming quickly sold off most of the company's assets. However, he still retained the company's core technology and the biochemical laboratory that his parents had originally started locally. He occasionally managed the lab, treating it as a way to remember his parents. Looking at the more than $10 billion in his account, Gu Ziming fell into a dilemma reminiscent of Wang Duiyu's situation. How to spend this more than $10 billion in just 1 month? A particularly catchy phrase popped into his mind. You can never spend it all in a lifetime. Gu Ziming recalled the plot where the sun was unusually active. In the early stages, Lin Fan was just surviving in a community, acting as the community's warrior. But in the mid-stage, the polar ice caps melted. The sea level rose directly by 60 meters, and within a year, island nations were mostly submerged. The protagonist Lin Fan and his harem then moved to a high ground in the southwest. Of course, Gu Ziming could follow the protagonist's path, just surviving and then fleeing southwest with the main group. However, he ultimately decided to buy a cruise ship, just in case, to prepare for the risk of rising sea levels. Moreover, this money had to be spent, although there was still some order in the post-apocalyptic world. Who knew how the currency system would be impacted? Bartering would be the norm in the apocalypse. Xiao Zhang, help me filter through the recently sold cruise ships. I'm planning to buy one, the bigger the better, and the shorter the construction time, the better. Gu Ziming made a call to his assistant. Xiao Zhang is Gu Ziming's professional assistant. In the past, when Gu Ziming had nothing to do, he would just relax at the office, but his abilities were still acceptable. Upon receiving Gu Ziming's order, he didn't raise any questions and directly started searching online for information about cruise ship sales. Building a cruise ship of around 100,000 tons takes quite a while, along with a series of procedures and deposits. Now that Gu Ziming wants to quickly buy a cruise ship, he can only look for one that is already available for sale. While waiting for his assistant to gather information on cruise ships for sale, Gu Ziming called Qin Feifei, intending to invite her out to provide guidance on producing special graphene materials. He wanted to call Lu Xiaoxiang as well, but her phone was always unreachable. Feeling a bit irritated, Gu Ziming decided to call Qin Feifei again. "Miss Qin, this is Gu Ziming. Has Professor Liu returned?" Qin Feifei responded promptly. "Professor Liu hasn't returned yet. She said she would be on a business trip for over a month and instructed us not to worry." Wait a minute, over a month? That timing seems a bit too coincidental. Gu Ziming shivered upon hearing the news, but he couldn't dwell on it for long. He quickly asked, "So, what should I do to start the research now?" "Don't worry, senior brother Gu. The teacher specifically instructed that if you want to start researching right away, you can always call me for help," Qin Feifei replied, a bit anxiously. She continued, "The method invented by the teacher isn't particularly complicated. There are just a few key parameters to pay attention to. I've already conducted several experiments with the teacher." "I didn't realize you were so capable, Feifei." Gu Ziming felt relieved knowing that Qin Feifei could also handle the production. Hearing her refer to him as senior brother made him change his address to junior sister Feifei. On the other end of the phone, Qin Feifei felt her cheeks flush slightly when Gu Ziming called her junior sister, but she didn't say anything. After all, she was indeed his junior. "Here's the thing. I might have to go on a business trip for a few days. Could you help me produce the first batch of special graphene?" Gu Ziming thought that if he needed to negotiate for purchasing a cruise ship, it would take several days, and he couldn't afford to waste time before the apocalypse. "Not a problem. That's what I'm here for," Qin Feifei readily agreed. With the teacher away, her work had temporarily halted, and she could conduct research better in Gu Ziming's lab. "Great. Let's start tomorrow. I'll pick you up from school and take you to the lab," Gu Ziming decided. Although Gu Ziming's father had started in biology, he later expanded into various fields, including materials science. Therefore, his lab had sufficient conditions to produce special graphene. Of course, the lab couldn't mass-produce it, and Gu Ziming estimated that in about 20 days, they could only produce around 10,000 meters if they didn't count the costs. From an industrial production efficiency perspective, that wouldn't be worth it, but Gu Ziming was racing against time. Moreover, the insulation materials for the shelter wouldn't rely solely on this layer of special graphene. Gu Ziming had reviewed the professional plans, and the insulation layer was composed of multiple materials. Adding a layer of special graphene was just an extra precaution. This was Gu Ziming's awareness as a villain. Without the protagonist's halo, all crises had to be faced head-on. There would be no twists of fate. At the same time, Gu Ziming contacted 3 construction teams to begin renovations on the estate and villa. The first team was a security construction team, a professional security company ranked globally, often hired by wealthy individuals to upgrade their properties. The most famous example was when they built a secure fortress for a wealthy person in the Golden Triangle, which withstood attacks from local rebel forces until government troops arrived to rescue them. Gu Ziming greeted the burly man in front of him. "Are you Captain Wang?" "Hello." The man took off his hard hat and smiled warmly at Gu Ziming. "Hello, Mr. Gu. I'm Wang Ji, the team leader of the Jindun Security Company in the Dahua region. I'm in charge of the security construction project for your estate." "All right, I have 2 requirements. It needs to be stable, and it needs to be fast." Gu Ziming stated his demands, hoping to complete the project 3 days before the apocalypse hit. The reason he left 3 days was to allow for any unforeseen accidents that might delay progress, giving them time to remedy the situation. "We understood Mr. Gu's requirements when we signed the contract. Our estimated construction period is 20 days. In the first 10 days, we will develop a security plan for the estate and complete the construction of the walls. Once your underground warehouse, solar panels, and villa insulation materials are installed, we will use the remaining 10 days to complete the overall security layout as quickly as possible." At this point, the burly man looked at the other 2 project leaders from the other construction teams. Gu Ziming invited 2 other well-known teams from the industry. One is a leading company in smart home integration, and the other is a professional storage construction company. "We have no problem," the person in charge of the smart home company assured. Mr. Gu requested that the solar and water recycling construction systems can be completed in a week. As for the villa renovation, it might take a bit longer, but it can also be done in 10 days. The person in charge of the storage company, seeing that the other 2 had already made commitments, quickly made a military-style promise. Mr. Gu needs warehouses and a basement, and our 12 teams can work simultaneously to complete the task in 10 days. Gu Ziming planned to build 5 large above-ground warehouses, 5 large underground warehouses, and 2 200-square-meter basements around the villa. The above-ground warehouses would store daily necessities such as clothing, appliances, and furniture, as well as some vehicles. The underground warehouses would store important strategic materials such as drinking water, canned food, weapons, gasoline, and some regular medicines. As for the materials for the villain space, those are truly for backup and can be carried around, truly belonging to oneself. As for the 2 presidential suites, one would serve as a backup safe house, and the other as a laboratory. The safe house would be set up 300 meters away from the villa, connected by 2 tunnels. These 2 tunnels would extend 1 kilometer to the north and south, serving as safe passages. The underground laboratory would conduct some final improvement experiments to test whether organisms are affected by the final changes and have undergone mutations. To ensure his plans are completed on time, Gu Ziming encouraged the on-site personnel with his financial capabilities. Everyone, I know this timeline is quite tight, but I will raise the welfare benefits to the highest level. As long as you complete the work on time and with quality, I will give each of the 3 responsible persons a bonus of 200,000. And each of the 3 brothers will receive 20,000. Everyone, hold on for 20 days. Even though the timeline and compensation had already been discussed when negotiating with the various companies, the 3 responsible persons and the people present couldn't help but feel excited upon hearing this news. After all, securing this big order would definitely bring bonuses to everyone, but it wouldn't be as generous as Gu Ziming. A single bonus would nearly double their earnings. Mr. Gu, you're too kind. Mr. Gu, even without the bonus, we will complete the work on time and with quality. Thank you, Mr. Gu. Lin Fan's home. Due to that unexpected fortune flying away, Lin Fan's life is not going well. He now relies on cold water and steamed buns to get through the day. Lin Fan is also too lazy to go back to work, and in front of the entire company, he directly called the manager a stupid dog. Later, realizing that simple insults didn't ease his frustration, Lin Fan slapped a colleague who came to mediate and swaggered away. Everyone in the office was dumbfounded. Lin Fan thought about how the salary for this month's work wouldn't be paid until next month. Moreover, since the apocalypse has arrived, it's uncertain whether there will even be a salary. Even if there is one, a bunch of numbers can't buy anything anyway. The resentment he felt after being reborn in the apocalypse had been bottled up inside him, and now it had finally been released. All that remains is the exhilaration of venting his anger. No, the little money I have won't last more than a few days in the apocalypse. Lin Fan looked at the pile of instant noodles and canned goods he bought for a few $1,000s, pondering his resources. Online loans? Credit cards? Or should I mortgage my house? Let's go for it. This ill-gotten wealth is meant for me to take, robbing the rich to help the poor. Here I come. President Gu, I've got news about the cruise ship you asked me to investigate. There's a 200,000-ton luxury cruise ship for sale in an island nation. Assistant Xiao Zhang immediately called Gu Ziming after receiving the news. Did you find out why it's being sold? Gu Ziming asked. To know that a transaction of this multi-billion level is quite complex. If there are any obstacles, it's not uncommon for it to drag on for a year and a half. I found out that the previous owner was in the luxury tourism business. However, that owner passed away due to an accident, leaving behind a massive debt. The creditors are now liquidating the assets and hope someone will take over the cruise ship in exchange for cash. The quicker the transaction, the better. All right, arrange a flight to the island nation immediately. I'll personally go and talk to the creditors. Gu Ziming decided it was best to discuss matters face-to-face with the creditors, considering that moving this cruise ship would also be quite a hassle. System, is there any way for me to control the cruise ship by myself? I don't want any outsiders on board. To know that a 200,000-ton cruise ship requires at least 1,000 crew members to operate normally. For Gu Ziming, this would be a ticking time bomb in the apocalypse. After all, This is because it needs many service personnel to operate as a luxury hotel. If it's just about getting the cruise ship moving, then only a few drivers would be necessary. The solutions are as follows. Solution 1. Exchange accommodation for a fully automatic intelligent control system that replaces 100% of the crew's work, requiring 100,000 luck points to. Solution 2. Exchange accommodation for dedicated bionic robots, 100 luck points each, needing 1,000 robots to replace the crew's work, but only 24 are needed to operate the cruise ship. Note: dedicated robots can only perform specific tasks. Okay, if it can solve the issue, then fine. Ziming thought that he needed to secure this cruise ship as quickly as possible. After that, he could continue storing supplies since such a large cruise ship can serve as a giant warehouse. It appears that he would need to gather more luck points. Thinking about luck points, Ziming began to wonder what Lin Fan would do now that he lost those 200 million. It was no surprise that Lin Fan would resort to the usual methods: various loans, mortgaging his house, and only paying deposits for purchases. All of this was waiting for the apocalypse to automatically account for. This was a bit harder than snatching a lottery ticket, but for Ziming, it was not without solutions. Captain Wang, help me look into a person. Ziming directly instructed the captain of his bodyguard team. As a typical rich second-generation antagonist in this novel, he had a few lackeys under him. Captain Wang, whose real name is Wang Chu, is the top lackey under Ziming, known for his ruthless personality and exceptional skills. According to the plot, this person has good character and strength. In the early stages when Ziming and Lin Fan were at odds, Lin Fan couldn't gain any advantage in strength due to the presence of a group of bodyguards. However, Lin Fan eventually thought of a way to create internal strife among Ziming and his people through resource manipulation. He intended to stand out, showing both bravery and strategy. As Lin Fan anticipated, Ziming's bodyguard team became chaotic due to a bit of resource conflict. But Wang Chu remained loyal, suppressing 6 of his subordinates by himself. In the end, however, one of the subordinates found an opportunity to silently undermine him, resulting in the demise of all the bodyguards. Afterward, with Ziming losing his bodyguards, he became the one in the spotlight, grinning wickedly. Okay, who does Mr. Gu want to investigate? Wang Chu, with a crew cut and dressed in a suit, looked formidable even with sunglasses that couldn't hide his imposing presence. Lin Fan lives in Dongyang Community, Building 9, 24th floor, room 2403. Ziming directly provided Lin Fan's address to Wang Chu and instructed, "Help me find out what he has been up to lately. Notify me immediately once you have any news." "Understood, Mr. Gu." After saying that, Wang Chu left after arranging security matters. Ziming watched Wang Chu's departing figure, feeling somewhat contemplative. Do your best, and leave the rest to fate. Countdown to the apocalypse is 10 days. Everything is progressing in an orderly manner. For the past 2 days, Ziming has been at the Gu family estate, watching the construction team carry out renovations to his home. The progress is changing day by day. At the same time, Ziming also began to contact intermediaries regarding the procurement of supplies for the apocalypse, delegating all tasks to the intermediary company. He asked the intermediary company to seek out various suppliers for the required goods, to carry out purchases and deliver them. If Ziming were to handle this task himself, dealing with tens of thousands of products, there's no guarantee he could manage it all by the time the apocalypse actually breaks out. Now, Ziming just needed to settle on a price range, specify the requirements for the supplies, and he could sit back and wait for the goods to arrive for inspection. This approach is undoubtedly the most efficient. In this process, the smart protagonist simply paid a deposit of a mere 10% and got all the goods. But in reality, Ziming couldn't get the 10 targets he ordered to agree on a deposit. He only managed to secure significant discounts on the prices. The reasons were twofold. Time was tight, and there was no foundation of trust between the two parties. The protagonist shook with excitement, managing to get hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars worth of goods with merely a few thousand in cash. It could only be attributed to his powerful protagonist aura. To save on transportation time, Gu Ziming also built a temporary warehouse nearby for the supplies to be stored. Once the actual storage facility was completed, the goods would be transferred immediately. Mr. Gu, I have news about the person you asked me to investigate. Wang Chu returned, his eyes red and bloodshot, clearly having spent a lot of time and effort checking into Lin Fan. Thanks for your hard work. What has Lin Fan been up to lately? Gu Ziming first patted Wang Chu on the shoulder before inquiring about Lin Fan's recent activities. Wang Chu immediately reported what he had found to Gu Ziming. Sure enough, Lin Fan had downloaded a dozen online loan apps and borrowed about 100,000 yuan. He was also preparing to mortgage his house, but it was still in the approval stage and hadn't been disbursed yet. His credit card was maxed out, and he had been shopping like crazy in the past few days. He bought all kinds of meat, rice, flour, vegetables, and seasonings, with each purchase amounting to thousands. After Wang Chu finished speaking, he glanced at Gu Ziming, unable to suppress a gulp, cold sweat breaking out. Lin Fan's actions seemed remarkably similar to those of his own boss, stocking up supplies, madly hoarding resources. Wang Chu knew that Gu Ziming was hoarding supplies. After all, many temporary warehouses had been built nearby. Supplies were continuously being delivered from all directions. Even a blind person could see it. Is the apocalypse coming? Wang Chu looked at Gu Ziming's half-smiling expression and couldn't help but stutter out his confusion. If I said yes, what would you do? Gu Ziming asked, staring intently at Wang Chu. Even if the apocalypse is coming, I will continue to protect the boss, Wang Chu declared, shaking off the flesh on his face, his gaze resolute. Gu Ziming didn't say much more, simply nodding in acknowledgement. Wang Chu's loyalty was partly due to that affordable old man. It was the old man who had found the bodyguard for him, and later, when Wang Chu's mother fell seriously ill, he wanted to resign to take care of her. The benevolent old man directly covered his mother's medical expenses and specifically allowed him to take paid leave. That leave lasted for 2 years, during which Wang Chu said very little. He silently felt grateful for the favor, planning to repay it slowly with his own life. Unfortunately, 2 years later, circumstances had changed. Both of Gu Ziming's parents had passed away, and the favor then fell onto Gu Ziming's shoulders. This is also why, in the original storyline, Wang Chu never betrayed Gu Ziming. Alright, stop thinking so pessimistically. With all the supplies your boss has stockpiled, I'm not afraid to have one more person. Gu Ziming decided to keep Wang Chu around during the end times, allowing him to lead a team to guard the estate's main gate. Aside from Wang Chu, Gu Ziming had already changed the other bodyguards several times through a security company. Jin Security is a well-known security company in the industry. Their security personnel are primarily recruited from retired veterans, and after recruitment, they receive targeted training in security skills. The professional quality of the personnel is the company's strong selling point, and it's said that they have provided security for many important government officials. Gu Ziming chose 10 of the top security personnel from Jin. The only selection criterion was loyalty. Anyone with a loyalty rating below 90 was unacceptable, no matter how skilled they were. The villain's perspective not only shows loyalty, but also allows for corresponding transformations based on specific demographics. For example, subordinates/employees are measured by their loyalty. Gu Ziming's villainous vision showed Wang Chu's loyalty, plus 100. This indicates that Wang Chu would never betray him under any circumstances. However, the other subordinates did not meet this requirement, so he could only select those with relatively high loyalty. Gu Ziming also asked the system if there was a way to address this. Yes, but it was quite expensive. The most cost-effective option was a one-time psychological steel stamp, costing 100,000 each. Gu Ziming thought to himself, high-tech stuff, but I can't afford to bribe a villain. Captain Wang, keep an eye on Lin Fan and find a way to get him on the dishonesty blacklist. Gu Ziming had already thought of a follow-up plan for Lin Fan and instructed Wang Chu. That's easy. That kid has maxed out several credit cards and borrowed nearly 100,000 online. Currently, he has no legitimate income, so getting him on the blacklist will be simple. Wang Chu called a helper who had some connections at the bank and immediately set off. Getting Lin Fan on the dishonesty list was just the first step. It would make it very difficult for him to get money from other sources. Next, all they had to do was make the online loan companies believe that Lin Fan had no intention of paying back the loans, and the loan companies would then target him. In order to avoid scrutiny and get money quickly, Lin Fan had sought out some illegal high-interest loan companies and had no plans to repay them. These people were not easy to deal with. When the time came, if a conflict arose between Lin Fan and the loan companies, the whole situation would become murky, giving Gu Ziming more room to operate. Once everything was arranged, Gu Ziming finally felt at ease as he boarded the flight to the island nation. Flight 280, first class. Gu Ziming was closing his eyes to rest, as these past few days had truly been mentally exhausting. At that moment, a blanket was gently placed over him. Gu Ziming opened his eyes to see a beautiful face with delicate features in front of him. "Sorry, sir. I saw you were sleeping as soon as you got on the plane, and I was afraid you'd catch a cold, so I took the liberty of covering you with a blanket." The flight attendant hurriedly bent down to apologize, repeatedly saying, I'm sorry. At this moment, Zhao Xiaoyu was feeling anxious. It was her first day on the job, and she had hesitated for a long time over whether to cover a sleeping passenger with a blanket. In the end, it took some courage to convince herself, but just as she was covering him, she accidentally woke him up. Zhao Xiaoyu simply hated her clumsy self. Gu Ziming sat up and looked at the flight attendant who had just covered him with a blanket. She had a lovely face, and the airline's traditional uniform complemented her long and graceful figure. The contradictory qualities of temptation and innocence were simultaneously displayed. "It's fine. Thank you for the blanket. I was just feeling a bit chilly from the air conditioning." After speaking, Gu Ziming adjusted the blanket up a bit to cover his entire body. Hearing that the customer did not blame her, Zhao Xiaoyu relaxed from her tense state, gave a deep bow, and then left. As she was bowing, Gu Ziming noticed the name tag on her uniform clearly read, Eastern Airlines, Zhao Xiaoyu. Gu Ziming, who had been feeling a bit dazed, instantly became alert because Zhao Xiaoyu, the second female lead from the original story, had appeared. Zhao Xiaoyu, a flight attendant, the second female lead. She lived in the same neighborhood as Lin Fan. On the day of the heat wave outbreak, she was at home on vacation. Since her family relied on takeout, they had no food at home and had to grit their teeth and endure hunger while waiting for the government's aid. From the original storyline, Zhao Xiaoyu was not just a pretty face. After starving for 3 or 4 days and exhausting the supplies waiting for rescue, she went out alone at night to search for resources. As expected, an unpredictable event occurred. She clashed with a group of thugs in a convenience store. Then Lin Fan just happened to appear, saving her like a hero, and from then on, she stayed in the protagonist's safe house. Later, due to her resilient personality, she trained diligently and became a key figure in the protagonist's harem. Once, she even saved Lin Fan during a crisis. If she got in the way, the protagonist's luck would surely diminish significantly. However, this process of getting in the way had to be carefully planned. Being too anxious could leave a bad impression on someone like Zhao Xiaoyu. Gu Ziming recalled relevant information about Zhao Xiaoyu in his mind. First, she came from a poor family because her father was a gambler, but she had a cheerful and lively personality. She had received a full scholarship at university, minored in English and island language, and worked 2 jobs to pay off her father's debts. While being a flight attendant, she also worked as a magazine translator. In summary, she was the standard example of a beautiful yet tragic second female lead. However, if the original author had not insisted on a regrettable narrative arc, Zhao Xiaoyu would likely have been the first female lead. 2 hours later, they were about to arrive in the island nation. Zhao Xiaoyu came over again to remind Gu Ziming, who was still resting with his eyes closed, that the flight was about to end. "Sir, wake up. We are about to land." A gentle voice reached Gu Ziming's ears, and he took a deep breath, catching a faint scent. He slowly opened his eyes and said, "Oh, thank you for the reminder. Miss Zhao, right?" Gu Ziming pretended to glance at her name tag before asking, Do you often fly the island routes? Sir, my name is Zhao Xiaoyu. It's my first time flying this route. Do you have any needs, sir? Zhao Xiaoyu looked puzzled. She didn't understand why Gu Ziming asked her this. It's like this. This is my first time visiting the island nation, and I'm looking for someone who speaks the island language to help me. Do you know anyone? I'll need them for about 3 days. Gu Ziming thought of a straightforward plan to have her be his translator, and then gradually get in the way later. He guessed that Zhao Xiaoyu would recommend herself since their flight would be staying for 2 to 3 days. Given her family's debts, she would certainly seize this part-time opportunity. Sir, what level of translation do you need? If it's for general translation, I think I can handle it. As expected, Zhao Xiaoyu recommended herself. General translation will do. I need to take care of a few things first, but I will be exploring Kyoto for a couple of days afterward. Gu Ziming readily agreed. As for the fee, it's 10,000 a day. How does that sound? Hearing this amount, Zhao Xiaoyu instantly became wary. Sir, I only do translation. I won't engage in any weird stuff. Don't worry. All you have to do is translate what I say in Mandarin to the island language for others, and then translate the island language back to Mandarin for me. Gu Ziming smiled as he said, You don't have to do anything else. Do you understand what I mean? Well then, let's discuss it after I get off the plane. Our flight will stay in Kyoto for 3 days, and we can return together after those 3 days. Seeing the exceptionally handsome Gu Ziming, Zhao Xiaoyu felt he wasn't a bad person and agreed. However, she was still thinking of buying a can of pepper spray after getting off the plane. Just in case Gu Ziming tried to do something bad, the spray would let him know. I, Zhao Xiaoyu, am not to be trifled with. Gu Ziming was unaware of her thoughts and handed her a business card. On the back of the card was the address of the hotel booked by his assistant, telling her to meet him there later. This time Gu Ziming came alone, and with his skills as a suited thug, he wasn't worried about troublemakers. After discussing the price, everything else would be handled by a professional legal team, so he didn't need too many people following him. At Kyoto Airport, as soon as Gu Ziming got off the plane, someone came to greet him. Excuse me, are you Mr. Gu? A man in a suit and glasses hurried over and bowed. Yes. Are you the representative from Sanjin Corporation? Before the other man in a suit and glasses could translate, Gu Ziming directly asked. Prior to coming to the island nation, Gu Ziming had already spent 100 luck points to exchange for master-level island language skills. Claiming that he didn't speak the island language on the plane was just a little tactic to get closer to Zhao Xiaoyu. Oh, so Mr. Gu speaks the island language. Yes, I am Matsumura Inoue, the president of Sanjin Corporation. After saying this, Matsumura Inoue extended his right hand, ready for a handshake. Gu Ziming looked at this somewhat short, bald president with 2 little mustaches and extended his hand, revealing a somewhat meaningful smile. Sanjin Corporation is one of the shareholders of the Oceanic Travel Group and also its largest creditor. The company that previously operated luxury ocean tourism is this Oceanic Travel Group. The board underestimated the prospects of ocean tourism in recent years and went into massive debt just to acquire this 200,000-ton cruise ship as a luxury gimmick. They plan to transform this cruise ship into an ultra-luxurious floating hotel, aptly named the Floating Imperial Palace. This name implies that it would be a palace that could move across the sea. Unfortunately, just as the ship was completed, the ocean tourism industry cooled down, and the revenue fell far short of expectations. Years went by, and the debt not only did not decrease but continually increased until the chairman of the Oceanic Travel Group had an accident. As the largest creditor, Sanjin Corporation naturally obtained the rights to handle this cruise ship. However, Sanjin Corporation specializes in jewelry and precious metals. They had some ideas about the luxurious floating hotel, but not much. Moreover, Matsumura Inoue had witnessed how the Oceanic Travel Group had gradually slid into losses. This cruise ship was a massive money sink. Its investment and returns were not proportional at all. Currently, Matsumura Inoue had only one thought. Quickly get rid of this hot potato and exchange it for concrete cash flow. Wouldn't that be better? This is also why a dignified president would come to pick Gu Ziming up from the airport. Clearly, Matsumura Inoue had done his homework on Gu Ziming and knew he had the ability to take on this hot potato. At the Sanjin Corporation conference room, Gu Ziming sat alone on one side, while the opposite side was filled with people. They obviously did not expect Gu Ziming to come alone for negotiations. During the pickup, they thought Gu Ziming's team hadn't come with him. Gu Ziming picked up his teacup, took a light sip, and said, "I came here alone. I think I'm here to negotiate, not to argue, right? Of course, we are here to cooperate." Matsumura in no way replied first. "We had a preliminary quotation over the phone, $1.8 billion, to be paid in a lump sum." Gu Ziming took out his previous offer and didn't elaborate further, merely sipping on the tea. The tea in this island country was still not as good as Wui de Hongpo, even though it might have been imported from Xia country. But there was a lack of that unique Eastern charm due to the different locale. The people opposite him began whispering among themselves, and it was Matsumura in no way who summarized and said, "Mr. Gu, we cannot accept that price. When the Oceanic Travel Group purchased this cruise ship, it cost $1.8 billion, and the subsequent renovation investment was at least $1.2 billion. Gu Ziming did not respond, but waited for Matsumura in no way to quote a price. "Our offer is $3 billion. Mr. Gu can start business immediately after purchasing. You should know that the Oceanic Travel Group took 5 years from placing the order to starting operations." "Oh, as far as I know, the Oceanic Travel Group hasn't earned any money from this cruise ship, right? I'm now buying a bunch of decaying steel for a whole lot of dark green dollars." Gu Ziming knew they really couldn't find a buyer, which was why they were selling what they considered the island nation's floating imperial palace to a person from Xia country. So Gu Ziming wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he said, "I just have too much money and nowhere to spend it, so I want to buy a cruise ship for fun. How about I add $200 million and see if my interest in it still stands as my final offer? I feel that in a few days, I might even be interested in flying toys in the sky." After saying this, Gu Ziming placed the teacup down on the table and started adjusting his masterfully tailored suit by himself. Seeing Gu Ziming look ready to leave at any moment made Matsumura in no way anxious. "Mr. Gu, allow us to discuss further." "Sure, may I tour your company?" "Of course." "Assistant, take Mr. Gu on a tour of our display area." Matsumura in no way instructed a woman in professional attire, then turned back to Gu Ziming and said, "Mr. Gu, feel free to express any needs to this assistant. We will make a decision after you've finished your tour. Regardless of whether this transaction succeeds or not, Mr. Gu will always be a valued guest of Sanjin." "All right, then I'll go for a tour first. I have a good impression of your company and hope this transaction won't affect our friendship." After saying this, Gu Ziming let the assistant lead the way and left. Haha, friendship? If it weren't for Gu Ziming's wealth and his cheap old man having a certain reputation, these people wouldn't be here having a proper discussion with him. But Gu Ziming thought that gritting his teeth for a moment to pick up a leak wasn't a bad deal. They had no idea about the benefits of this cruise ship. If they knew the apocalypse was coming, they wouldn't sell it even at 10 times the price. These people were dying to have a luxurious cruise ship to escape the chaos and continue their extremely lavish lifestyle. As Gu Ziming was exploring the jewelry exhibition, the meeting room erupted with heated discussions, voices raised and faces flushed. "No way, the cost of this cruise ship is $3 billion. If we sell it to that Chinese man for $2 billion and take a debt reduction of $500 million, our company will suffer at least a $1.5 billion loss. But right now, besides that fool Gu Ziming, we can't find anyone else willing to purchase. The cruise has been idle for a year, and we've been covering its maintenance costs all this time." "Exactly. We tried to get a bank loan, but they only offered $1.3 billion. This price is just too low. All right, then let's vote. Raise your hand if you agree to sell the Sea Palace for $2 billion to Gu Ziming." Said that, Matsumoto in no way was the first to raise his right hand. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Then 4 more people raised their right hands. A couple of others, seeing that everyone was raising their hands, reluctantly raised theirs as well. Good. Unanimous approval. Matsumoto in no way stood up hands on the table, leaning slightly forward as he spoke in a low voice. Everyone, we expanded too quickly before it's sanguine. Now the jewelry industry is entering a cold winter. Gold prices have started to drop from their peak. It's time to prepare for a strategic contraction. If we can secure this $2 billion in cash, we won't fear any challenges. Yes, the president is wise. +7. Gu Ziming was looking at the various jewelry pieces on display, but his thoughts drifted elsewhere. After this deal, it would only cost $2 billion. With the remaining funds for storing supplies and converting shelters, it wouldn't go over $2 billion total. So, how to spend the remaining $6 billion? Gu Ziming first thought about exchanging it for gold. If there is one thing that will see a surge in value in the apocalypse besides food or survival items, it's gold. In the later part of the original storyline, the world had adapted to the harsh high-temperature environment of the apocalypse. The remnants of humanity completely changed their living habits, becoming creatures of the night. Civilization began advancing towards a cyberpunk industrialization. Gold, in this context, became the essential metal for the entire cyberpunk industrialization. At that time, coins would also become the worldwide currency. However, for Gu Ziming to exchange a total of $6 billion into gold within just 20 days would be a monumental task for an ordinary person. While gold jewelry could be exported relatively easily, large-scale gold exportation would certainly draw the attention of national authorities. You see, $6 billion could be exchanged for approximately 110 tons of gold. Of course, with the rogue space, he just needed to buy the gold and store it there, and no one would notice. Gu, how's the browsing going? A voice interrupted Gu Ziming's thoughts. It was Matsumoto Inoue, who had already discussed the matter. President Matsumoto, I've seen your company's capabilities. Gu Ziming replied lightly, then immediately asked, has a decision been reached? I hope I won't leave empty-handed. Yes, it's settled. We agree to sell our sea palace for $2 billion. Matsumoto Inoue's face was practically splitting with delight, looking quite satisfied with the deal. Great, no problem. Once the contract is signed, I will have someone come to open it up. After leaving the territorial waters, I'll pay you the full amount at once. Does that payment method work for you? Of course it works. Mr. Gu's financial prowess is truly exceptional. Our sanguine couldn't possibly produce that much cash in one go. After saying this, Matsumoto Inoue bowed again, expressing his admiration for Gu Ziming. President Matsumoto, you flatter me. By the way, does your company have any channels for purchasing gold? I'd like to buy a batch to create 2 golden lions for my cruise ship. Gu Ziming directly brought up his plan to buy gold with this local jeweler. Oh, Mr. Gu, you've come to the right person. Sanguine is one of the top 3 jewelers in the islands. Having heard Gu Ziming's intention to buy gold, Matsumoto Inoue immediately shifted to a serious business demeanor. How much gold does Gu need? President Matsumoto, I'll take as much gold as you can provide. Gu Ziming replied directly. Matsumoto Inoue instinctively doubted Gu Ziming's reason for wanting to use gold to create golden lions. However, after a moment's thought, he considered that Gu had just spent $2 billion on a cruise ship. Seeing Gu's demeanor, it was clear he wasn't looking to start a travel agency, but rather just seeking enjoyment for himself. Buying some gold to make a decorative piece wouldn't be too surprising. It's not the rich second generation who are wasting money that's concerning. It's the ones who start businesses. Once Gu Ziming grows tired of it and sells both the cruise and the golden lions, he might lose even less than he would if he invested in a travel agency. I can provide $500 million worth of gold. Would Mr. Gu be able to buy that? Matsumoto Inoue initially thought about offering $100 million, but seeing Gu Ziming's wealthy appearance, he decided to probe with $500 million instead. $500 million? Do you look down on me? I want to make the kind of stone lions that guard our country's gates. Do you know what I mean? Gu Ziming said with a feigned displeasure. I'm sorry, Mr. Gu, I didn't mean to look down on you. Matsumoto Inoue immediately bowed again, then spoke reverently. I've visited Jiangnan province in your country, and the scenery is breathtakingly beautiful. People there often have 2 stone lions guarding their courtyard, which looks very imposing. Yes, I want to make golden lions that resemble those stone lions. How much can you prepare? And we can settle based on today's gold price. Gu Ziming asked directly. We can exchange approximately $3 billion worth of gold from Mr. Gu. This will come from our company's floating reserves. Any more would impact our operations. Okay, can you help me transport this gold to the cruise ship? As soon as the gold is on board, I'll settle the payment. Hearing that he could quickly convert part of the reserves into dollars, Matsumoto in no way's expression brightened significantly as he eagerly replied, Absolutely, we can do that. Just like that, Matsumoto in no way thought, first sign a contract, pay a deposit, as there's no way he would hand over the cruise ship and gold up front to Gu Ziming. Especially since not conducting a full cash settlement would eliminate most of the negotiation hurdles. For a transaction of this magnitude, the mutual haggling usually prolongs negotiations indefinitely. With the remaining $3 billion, Gu Ziming decided to exchange for gold in the United States and conveniently buy a batch of weapons. Asia had far stricter controls on weapons, and to witness gunfights every day, one would need to go to the land of the free. After finalizing the agreement, Gu Ziming politely declined Matsumoto in no way's invitation to a banquet and went directly to the hotel he had booked. As soon as he entered the hotel lobby, he saw a pouting girl walking straight towards him. Mr. Gu, where's the hotel meetup we agreed on? Zhao Xiaoyu had just changed out of her flight attendant uniform into a cartoon-themed t-shirt. She looked less seductive and exuded more youthful energy. Gu Ziming shrugged with a smile and said, I'm sorry, Ms. Zhao. I just finished a negotiation. To express my apologies, you're now my translator and tour guide. I'll let you plan the rest of the time we have, and I'll cover all expenses during this period. Do you accept my apology? Mr. Gu, you're overestimating it. I shouldn't have gotten angry with you. Zhao Xiaoyu wasn't really mad. She had momentarily been mesmerized by Gu Ziming's youthful and handsome appearance, coupled with the gentle and approachable demeanor he deliberately displayed. This made her subconsciously overlook Gu Ziming's boss status and treat him just like a friend. Just relax. You can treat me as a friend. Gu Ziming chuckled lightly and continued, I don't want the atmosphere to be so serious along the way. All right, then I'll treat you as a friend. Zhao Xiaoyu laughed lightly. Then she playfully stuck out her tongue and said to Gu Ziming, Even as friends, you still have to pay, you know? As expected of the cheerful and lively second female lead, her playful manner nearly enchanted Gu Ziming. Gu Ziming thought to himself, Lin Fan, if you can't handle this Zhao Xiaoyu, then let me take care of it for you. For the next 2 days, Gu Ziming spent time with Zhao Xiaoyu, exploring Kyoto. These were some of the rare moments he had to relax and unwind. Ever since he realized he had crossed over into being a villain in an apocalyptic novel, he had been constantly preoccupied with 2 things: the rivalry of the protagonist and the impending arrival of the apocalypse. These concerns weighed on his chest like 2 massive mountains, making it hard for him to breathe. After this trip, Gu Ziming anticipated he would be busy dealing with the apocalypse. Once the apocalypse arrived, he wouldn't be able to enjoy himself freely like now. The unusually active sun radiated enough heat and ultraviolet rays to kill anyone exposed for just 15 minutes in broad daylight. Ding! Female lead Zhao Xiaoyu has changed her view of the protagonist. Luck plus 1800. Gu Ziming glanced at Zhao Xiaoyu, who was resting her head on his shoulder, looking drowsy. Well, looks like she's trying to play it cool. The two were on the bus heading back to the hotel after their final day of sightseeing. They snuggled together like a couple, drawing envious glances from onlookers. Gu Ziming activated his villainous eye to scan Zhao Xiaoyu. Name: Zhao Xiaoyu. Faction: Villain, Original Protagonist Faction. Affection level: plus 70. Key abilities: proficient in island language skills, proficient archery skills, basic aviation service skills, etc. With an affection level of 70, Zhao Xiaoyu was directly classified into the villain faction. No wonder he received such a significant luck boost. As long as the protagonist's affection level exceeds plus 60, achieving friendship level will classify them into the villain faction. Zhao Xiaoyu also possessed archery skills that allowed her to hit targets accurately within 10 meters. It was precisely because of this combat skill that she became a key member of the protagonist's harem in the original storyline. Unfortunately, she was now mine. Gu Ziming playfully pinched Zhao Xiaoyu's cheek, contemplating. He noticed that, despite pretending to be asleep, Zhao Xiaoyu's fair face was gradually turning red, and her long eyelashes fluttered slightly. At Lin Fan's home, in recent days, Lin Fan felt that everything was going wrong. The online lenders kept calling him, and after blocking all their numbers, they even contacted his workplace, the property management of his community, and even some distant relatives he had never heard from before. Then there were the incessant reminders for credit card repayments. Lin Fan had maxed out 3 credit cards, each by 10,000 yuan, and the banks were bombarding him with calls. Next came the house he was preparing to mortgage. People had already come to inspect it, and it was agreed that funds would be released the next day, but when the day came, and the day after, it still hadn't happened. When Lin Fan called the processing personnel, he was told it was still under review. Lin Fan intended to mortgage the house first and use the money to renovate it. Now, with no mortgage funds available, he had no choice but to buy some cheap insulating materials online and make some hasty renovations to the house. Recalling all the bad luck he had faced these past few days, his heart brimmed with frustration, and he couldn't help but curse. These stingy bastards, I just borrowed a little money. Do they have to act like it's a life-and-death situation? The apocalypse is about to arrive, and this money in their hands is just a pile of digits. After venting, Lin Fan felt a bit better and began to inventory his supplies in his storage space. There were instant noodles, pickled cabbage flavor, braised beef flavor, chicken and mushroom flavor, each variety piled up like a small mountain. Lin Fan thought about ordering KFC, a grand feast, red wine steak, or spicy hot pot. But when he ordered a family bucket, it cost over 100 yuan. Though he enjoyed that meal, Lin Fan realized that 100 yuan could buy nearly 30 packs of instant noodles, enough to last at least 10 days, which made him wince in pain. After that family bucket meal, Lin Fan started living frugally. Renovating the house cost Lin Fan 40,000 yuan, and he spent another 10,000 stockpiling oil, rice, and flour, along with a heap of the cheapest cabbage. He dared not buy too many ingredients that required cooking. Firstly, because Lin Fan wasn't a good cook, and secondly, cooking aromas could attract hungry neighbors, which would be quite troublesome. Currently, the house only had simple insulation done, which couldn't stop the starving neighbors from being drawn by the smell of food. On a hot day, Lin Fan decided not to touch the instant noodles he was about to throw up from. He chose to cook for himself, making a serving of fried rice with an egg alongside a boiled cabbage. Unfortunately, he added too much salt to the fried rice, making it overly salty, and the cabbage had no flavor at all, prompting Lin Fan to slam his chopsticks on the table in frustration. Damn it! Why is it that everyone else returns after crossing over and can live comfortably while I'm struggling like this? I refuse to accept it. At this moment, there was a series of urgent knocking sounds at the door. Lin Fan didn't respond and quietly looked through the peephole. Outside stood a middle-aged man with an account book and a young man who looked like a repairman. "Mr. Lin, are you home? I'm from the property management, here to check the water meter." The middle-aged man waved the account book in his hand, shouting without caring whether Lin Fan could see him. Water meter? That's right. Lin Fan remembered another way to cope with the heat: taking baths. He had been running the tap day and night these past few days, filling up buckets to store water in his space, and then bringing the buckets back out to fill them again. Lin Fan had also thought about more efficient methods, like going directly to a lake to pump water. However, the space could only store complete items that Lin Fan had touched, so lake water couldn't be directly collected. Using buckets to draw water wasn't as good as just using tap water. At least tap water was much cleaner. Lin Fan had collected quite a bit of water, so the property management must have noticed the unusual water usage, prompting them to come check on the situation. Thinking of this, Lin Fan felt a bit at ease. After all, during the apocalypse, knocking on the door meant dealing with people, and dealing with people meant danger. "I'm coming, stop knocking." Lin Fan stepped back a few paces and then walked over to open the door. Mr. Lin. Hello. I'm from the property management. We noticed an abnormal amount of water usage at your home recently, so I came over to see if you need any assistance. The middle-aged property representative asked. Is that so? I've been doing a big cleaning at home lately, so I might have used a bit more water than usual. Don't worry, I'll pay the water bill on time, Lin Fan replied with a smile. Okay. Do you need us to check if the water meter is malfunctioning? Mr. Lin, your water usage has exceeded 90 tons recently. The man inquired with some curiosity. No need, thank you. Lin Fan directly refused. He knew there wasn't much wrong with the water meter. If he let them in to check, they might discover the strange renovations in his house. Given that he had already lost hope in becoming invincible, Lin Fan didn't want to be as ostentatious as before. All right, how much water our clients use is not our business. We are here just to eliminate any anomalies. If you need anything, Mr. Lin, feel free to call the property management. With that, the property representative marked a note on an anomaly report and left with the repairman. If Ziming could see the property management's visit, he would definitely be surprised. This meant that the protagonist's intelligence-diminishing aura wasn't as strong as it used to be. It represented that the protagonist's luck was slowly draining away. In a normal scenario, the property would have noticed Lin Fan's unauthorized modifications to the house and the unusual water usage. They would either ignore it or come forward to mock him. Lin Fan, did you make your house so solid because you think the apocalypse is coming? Ha ha ha. Lin Fan, why are you buying so much food? It's not like it's going to run out. You can eat and then buy. It's fresher that way. Ha, look at that doomsday fantasist over there. Ha. The protagonist being mocked was the norm. Now it was just a standard anomalous inspection. Meanwhile, far away in the island country, Ziming. Ding! Protagonist Lin Fan's preparation for the apocalypse is severely lacking. Luck is draining. Host luck plus 188, plus 188, plus 188. Ziming had just sent Zhao Xiaoyu to her room when he turned to leave. Unfortunately, their relationship hadn't reached that stage yet, so Zhao Xiaoyu didn't invite him in to sit. On his way back to his room, the system chimed again. Looking at it, it was another large sum of luck value credited. The protagonist Lin Fan's preparation for the apocalypse was lacking. Luck is draining. It seemed Wang Chu was putting in some effort. However, that wasn't enough. He was still waiting to eliminate the protagonist. Ziming walked toward the huge floor-to-ceiling window, gazing at the dazzling night view of Kyoto Tower, took a sip of red wine, and said, "It's time to add some fuel to the fire."